Welcome back, MTG Joe here, and today we're going to be doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown. This video in particular is for the historic format on MTG Arena. If you want to catch standard, the video is already up. We'll probably revisit Alchemy once the new cards come out for the newest Alchemy drop. But really what we try to do here, if you're new to the channel and new to the series, is look at the top performing decks on the Arena ladder for the respective format, and we're getting this data from Untapped GG. It's a companion tool that runs alongside your Arena client. It tracks your win rates, it provides you ideas in terms of what decks you could build with the wild cards you have by syncing your collection. There's in-game overlay options to see like the cards in your deck and stuff like that. It's free to get started, so you can follow the link in the video description if you do want to download that. And before we jump into it, as always, I do post these deck lists in the video description, so if there is something you want to see, import it easily into Arena and try out, you can easily do so by just copying the link over there. So jumping into it, we are looking at the historic format. This is for the week of February 27th to March 6th, Platinum to Mythic rank, and we're looking at 36,000 games of best of one Magic. So we'll jump into the decks. As always, if you do enjoy this type of content, it's greatly appreciated if you can. Drop a like and comment on the video, and if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing to the channel. So I'm going to do things a little bit different. Let me know what you think about doing the kind of look like this, because I know people were asking for bigger images, and then folks were asking for the stats, so I'm trying to find a happy medium. So this is kind of the list view that we usually show, but the top deck right now that we see is mono Red Aggro, so popping in here. Bigger image, hopefully this helps more like the Arena view. So this is 210 games played, 61% win rate. So there's always been kind of this core of mono red. We've seen it week in, week out. It's kind of the combination of Reckless Ringleader, giving your things haste. You have like Burning-Tree, Kari, Robber, and then kind of the flex spots are whether or not you're on Annex, whether or not you're on Torbran, if you're on the Roiling Vortex or not, if you're on the Ferocidons or not. And then this version here this week is trying out a new card. Kumano faces Kakkazan. This is in place of the 1/1 Goblin that sacks to deal damage. So kind of it makes you weaker against the Soul Sisters deck because you can't ping off little creatures. But this is a card that lets you deal some damage, pump up your creatures for the next turn. So you can do this into like a 3/3 Robber the Rich, which seems pretty good. They're also the 4 of Torbran in this version. I personally don't like the Torbrans. I feel like it's a win more card. Doesn't do anything on its own without haste. And because they're legendary, you playing 4 of usually gets caught in your hand. I've been kind of a proponent of Static Discharge in the deck, as well as 1 to 2 Chandra 4s. I do like their mana base. I would usually try to find space for at least one red Castle Embereth, or even one of the channel lines. It's pretty much free value. But that's mono red. The next deck we have is Squirrel Twin Combo. This is a deck that's always usually at the top of best of one ladder. And really what we're trying to do here is an infinite combo, if you're not familiar with it. The combination of Heliod Sun Crowned, Scurry Oak, and any creature that says when a creature enters the battlefield, gain a life. So Lunarch Veteran, Soul Warden, or Prosperous Innkeeper. And how that works is Scurry Oak says whenever a 1/1 counter is placed on it, you get to create a squirrel. So Scurry Oak enters the battlefield, triggers the life gain. Heliod puts a counter on Scurry Oak. Scurry Oak creates a squirrel. Squirrel triggers the life gain. You put a counter on Scurry Oak, and then you basically create a loop. You can gain as much life and as many squirrels as you can click before you kind of time out. So it's kind of a way to win like that. You also have the backup plan of Voice of the Blessed, as well as Trelasarra to get really large creatures. Trelasarra also helps you scry into specific combo pieces, and you're kind of paired up with the Collected Company. The flex spots are usually if you're on Skyclaves or not, if you're on the Alchemy, the 4-drop that seeks out another creature kind of thing, and then you kind of play around that. I think you could usually get away with like 1 creature land in the deck. It's usually not too much of a cost and gives you some insulation against board wipes. A deck that kind of came out, we haven't seen it toward, it's always been around, but never at this high of a win rate. Boros Burn and it's really mono red, burn, splash, lightning helix. 310 games, which is actually, if we look at the sample size, higher than any of the other 2 performing decks. So it's got a good population relative to the others, and 58% win rate. So we see like the faces, Kumano again. You have kind of your wizard package of Gitu Lavamancer, Soulscar Mage, as well as Viashino. And then you have Play with Fire, Electrostatic Blast, the Alchemy card that lets you draw some more cards. You have your Vortexes to shut off life gain, Static Discharge, which scales, Skewer, and Wizard's Lightning. Notably, if we look at this deck, there's nothing like Light Up the Stage, Reckless Impulse to gain card advantage. Your card advantage is coming from Electrostatic Blast. Mana base wise, you get the fast lands mixed in. You're seeing some copies of like Sokuzan, along with some Deads and the Ramunap Ruins in the deck. So deck that's usually fun. It's always a race against combo. Can you deal enough damage? The nice thing about this deck versus compared to the mono red, you have more outs against something like Reanimator because they have harder time naming specific pieces. Also, like in the creature mirrors, you can play kind of more of this control-y element if you need to, where your burn spells, you don't necessarily always have to go face in certain matchups. Some matchups you use your burn spells to control, and you get chip damage here or there and try to run your opponent out resources. Moving on next, we have mono green elves. So something cool, like you can see here, if we look at these other decks, all the cards are illuminated for me. That means all these decks I can copy to Arena, play right away with untap. If we look at elves, I don't own most of these cards in Arena. Elves is a deck that's got a lot of wild cards that are specific to the Elves deck. I don't enjoy Elves, so I've never crafted it. I don't like decks where you're basically all into a board wipe or you lose. So that's usually not where I'm at with decks. But this deck usually can have very fast starts, can overwhelm your opponent. 410 games, it's a very popular deck, 56% win rate. Nothing really innovative about the deck. You're seeing one Freyleys. This card always impresses when it comes out, especially on turn 2, because you can Llanowar Elf into Freyleys, untap the Llanowar Elf, and then play out like another 1-drop, which is a really, really good turn 2. Elvish Archdruid that if you let it them untap with this, just gains like tons of mana. But the deck itself, you're just looking to play a bunch of dorks, generate a lot of mana, and then through Lord effects and pump effects. So you have your Elvish War Master or your Allosaurus Shepherds pump a bunch of mana into, or cast a Crater Hoof and kind of win through that. It's probably worth playing like one Boseiju just in case. It's free to play. Like all these decks, monocolor decks, just play one of the channel lands. It's like free value. So those are kind of like the top performing decks this week. Like we have Phoenix in the mid 56s, and we have Azorius Control. We're seeing Wandering Emperor in this version. A lot of the control decks are now on 4 Divine Purge for the aggro matchups, just to slow things down. So something to just be mindful of. The Phoenix list, we'll see it in best of 3 most likely. So yeah, we'll see it there. So moving to best of 3, we'll do the same kind of idea. And surprisingly, the top performing deck, while only 110 games, from Untapped at least, is Mono Red again. So Mono Red's usually very well represented in best of 1, but it never really makes it in best of 3. So we'll look at the deck in the sideboard. So this one, we don't see the Kumano, we see the Fanatical Firebrands. This is pretty much like the stock best of 1 list for the main board. You see your Embercleaves, Torbrands, Annex, kind of playing with that. You have your Castle Embreaths in there, and then the Dens. And then the sideboard, so with the sideboards, I'll kind of try to explain. So Mono Red I've played a lot of, so I can probably explain what you're going to be bringing these in for. So Embereth Shieldbreaker is for the Azoria's Affinity style decks, Cat Oven decks, anything that's relying on artifacts. Roiling Vortex is versus control and life gain decks, anything slow that you need to get damage or that they're heavy on removal. Also, it's very good against Rakdos Arcanist because they cast the cards for off Arcanist for 0 mana, so they would pay 5 life. Fires of Invention, if you ever run into it, also deals 5 damage per card they cast. Any sort of Mizzix Mastery deck also deals 5. Bonecrusher Giant will come in against creature mirrors, as well as any sort of Serra Emissary or 9 lives lock, because Stomp gets around protective damage. Ferocidon versus any weenie creature decks that are going wide to ping damage, or also anti-life gain decks. Chandra's for your grindy matchups where you want the card advantage, as well as a way to deal 4 damage with the removal, and Hazard's versus the heavy removal decks or games that go long. So that's how I would sideboard. In and outs would vary to matchup, but that's kind of what the thoughts of are those sideboard cards. Now we move into Azorius Auras. So this is a deck that's always, some form of Auras has always been very popular since its inception. Since like Core Spirit Dancer came out, we've had some variation of Auras. It's very powerful. I find at one point I played a lot of Auras. I made like MIQ with it. It kind of gets boring after a while, I find. But more frustrating was you snowball really hard, but other games you just lose if your hand doesn't come together. I do like this version because you're playing a good mix of creatures. The Esper Sentinel helps you with card advantage in the like removal heavier versions, forces your opponent to kind of play awkwardly around. You have your Saviors coming out, Core Spirit Dancer, and then we're also seeing Light Paws, Emperor's Voice. So whenever an aura enters the battlefield under your control, if you cast it, you search your library for an aura card with mana value less than or equal to that aura cost with a different name and put it onto the battlefield attached to Light Paws. So you can kind of tutor specific cards. So you can get stuff like Aether Tunnel. We got beat this week with an opponent just tutoring this. You know, we locked down the board and we were in a good spot, but then they got Aether Tunnel and they kind of got through our blockers. See, like one of Karametra's Blessing, one of Spell Pierce, kind of protection spells. But basically, you slap a bunch of big auras on a creature, make it big, try to make it unblockable. Sideboard-wise, Karametra's Blessing versus like removal decks. You got same with like Dovin's Veto for protection, along with Spell Pierce. Portable Hole, Declaration as removal. Heliod's Punishment as kind of removal tempo play. And then 4 Cerulean Drakes versus any of the red decks. Anything with like red mana in it gives you protection against those types of spells. So like heavy burn-based spells. This is a really cool deck. So we're seeing various types of Omnicult Anvil decks show up in Standard, Alchemy, Historic, Modern even, Pioneer. I don't think Legacy, but I could see some sort, like anywhere where there's a lot of cheap, good, effective artifacts, it just gets better and better. So close to 61% win rate, 380 matches. We played against this deck, a version of it with Mayhem Devil and Woe Strider in our Mono Black Golos game. I got, like, the player ended up messaging me after, found me on YouTube, but the match was really sweet. If you want to see like their perspective of it, it's in the Mono Black Golos video. It's the first game we played. The deck's really sweet, and this is something I'm going to try out. I like these kind of nickel and dime decks that take a lot of game actions, but basically you are using Omnicult Anvil, so whenever one or more artifacts leave your battlefield for the turn, you create a construct, and you can sack an artifact to drain and gain a life each turn, on your turn specifically, for the token. So it's a cat oven deck that you also have the Ravenous Squirrels that get really large in the deck. You can use Experimental Synthesizer as basically card advantage in the deck. Everything in your deck costs 1 or 2 mana, so you're pretty much always going to get card draw off it, even if it's just a land. You also get tokens off it. You're able to use stuff like Voldaren Epiture, which is just like such an innocuous card, but it's fit in a lot of different shells. The Blood Token is a way to get a token going for the Omnicult Anvil. We also see Deadly Disputes that gets you card advantage, Meat Hooks to get the drains on, some Fatal Push and Thoughtseize mixed in there. I'm curious how many lands. 4, 8, 12, 16, 19, 20, 22. So, or, you know, look at the 22 that says right there, but just showing off, I got quick maths. This is a Luris build, so no Mayhem Devil, no Woe Strider. And it's pretty clean on the sideboard. Basically, control, creature decks. You have a bunch of artifacts, so it's a 1 mana deal 4. Soul Guide Lantern for Graveyard Hate, Go Blank for control, and Graveyard Hate. So, very clean list. You'll notice some green mana scattered into the mana base. This is specifically for the activated ability of Ravenous Squirrel. I don't know if you necessarily want this many green sources, because you cast the Squirrel anyways, but off the black mana. I would probably want to go up more creature lands if I were to try it. So I would probably just cut down like probably one of these. And then if you need another green, so you're playing this as a red source, so you cut down one of these, go up a den, cut down one of these, go up a hive. Kind of play it like that. I'm a big fan of creature lands. They do a lot in the format. And lastly, is it Phoenix deck that we see week in, week out, usually towards the top, specifically in best of 3. So really what the variations we look at week to week with these Phoenix decks are their creature packages. Sometimes they're all in on the graveyards. Sometimes they're a little bit larger. So we're seeing now, you always have the Dragon Rage as a 4 of. You always have the Arclights of a 4 of. We've seen some lists with Delver. They've mostly moved off it. Sprite Dragon, for the most part, the last couple of weeks has been a 2 of. We've also seen 2 of Crackling Drakes in the main board as a 2 of. This week we're seeing 1 Ox, 1 Stormwing. The last few weeks we've been on 2 Stormwings, 1 Ox, just I guess based on graveyard hate. And then your kind of removal package, you can see it's pretty much stock. There is no Lightning Axe in the list. That seems like to be something that they've mostly moved off of. You know, the 2-for-1 yourself to get stuff in the graveyard when you're not as graveyard focused. Kind of makes sense. And you see 4 of Ops, 4 of Consider is your card advantage, along with Expressive Iteration. Interestingly, 1 Mystical Dispute main. I mean, when it works, it works. Finale is also a 1 card cast to get 3 going for your Phoenixes. And really in the mana base, we're just seeing the Otoro and Sokazan. Channel lines fit nicely into the shell. 1 of Den for the creature line. Yeah, and the sideboard, it's like Teferi or specific activated abilities you need to hit. Graveyard decks, creature decks, or decks with like Cage, stuff like that to hit. Gust versus red-green decks, Negate versus control, Anger for the mirror, or for mirrors or creature decks, Bonecrusher to break, 9 lives or Sarah's Emissary lock. In a pinch, you can also just have it as creature removal. Brazens usually to hit graveyard hate. Dispute versus control, mirrors or control. This usually comes in if your opponent boards in a lot of graveyard hate. Also, having 4 toughness is hard to kill and it can serve as card advantage. And another Crackling Drake for graveyard hate. So that's pretty much for the week. I've not been playing really any historic. If we take a look, let me pop. What have I been playing? This is usually what I see. Like this installment, if I have anything good. Alchemy Enchantment's very good, 87% win rate. Otherwise, I haven't really been playing too much. This deck was fun in Historic. So I'm still above 50% win rate. It's like a Golos mono black mid-rangey control deck that with basically try to use Golos to cast multiple Invoke Displayers in a turn. So we went like 5 and 5 with it, so 50% win rate. I was 4-1 and then kind of went 1-4 to kind of wrap up. Ran into a bunch of control decks. It plays pretty poor into control. It's pretty good against creature decks. Like super bad against the colorless Ugin ramp decks, and I ran into 3 of them in a row somehow, or 2 in a row. Says I won. I didn't win. I certainly did not win. But Karn, the Great Creator, shutting down like my Mind Stones from activating, my Golo, stuff like that didn't really work well. But usually this time, like at the end of the videos, I kind of highlight some decks that I've liked. I usually like taking tier 2 decks and try to making them, good in top 1200. See if we do last season. Previous season. I finished top 1200. Let me just see what I finished with. Fires of Invention. So Fire of Invention's Planeswalkers. Did pretty well with this. 9-2, got top 1200 with it. Again, fun deck. Like, it's not going to be tier 1, but it's a deck I enjoy playing. Kind of like the strategy, but kind of give you some ideas there. My profile is always public, so if you ever want to see any decks I play, anything like that, you can just pull up my profile and you can find any of the decks, my win rates, everything like that. Everything I play is public, so if stuff works, if stuff doesn't, then you can see. I try to have stats to back up all my kind of ancillary kind of status, but doing decent all right this month. To be honest, it's basically this deck that's been carrying me this month. Everything else has been kind of poops, or like 50%, but I haven't been playing too much Constructed this month. I've been practicing for MIQ, which is limited, where I'm doing okay. I'm trying to figure out the format. MIQ is limited. So I have a 60% win rate in the format, but like I can't win without white. So if you have any suggestions for me for draft, be appreciated. Kind of figuring out the format as we go along, what works, what doesn't. But anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great one and stay safe out there.